So running our high-low game in the debugger can be a bit slow. The loop is only going around 10 times, but if we had a much larger range of numbers, you'd soon get pretty bored clicking the step over button. When I ran the program in the last video, things really only got interesting when the computer guessed 99. What would be really good would be if we could get the debugger to stop at that point when guesses 99. Luckily, we can do just that. I'll show you now how to do that with both IntelliJ and PyCharm's debuggers. But if you're using a different IDE, your debugger may well have a similar feature. Unfortunately, the idle debugger doesn't have conditional breakpoints, which is what we need here. So if you're using idle, you have to step over your code in the usual way. So to achieve this, firstly set a breakpoint on line 8, which is our while loop. And we're not interested in seeing the first few lines being executed. The debugger is going to stop each time the loop goes around, which isn't really what we want. We're really only interested in what happens once low and high are equal. So to set a condition on a breakpoint, right-click the breakpoint dot in the margin. Now the condition that we want here, typing into this field, is low is equal to high. So I'm going to type low equal high, remembering to use two equal signs. And I'm going to click done once I've done that. So notice that there's now a little question mark next to the red dot as well to indicate that it's a conditional breakpoint. So to start the debugger as we would normally do. And you saw me right click in the editor pane and choose debug. I like to do that as per normal because that makes sure that I'm debugging the correct file, because you might have a different file selected up here, in which case it would be invoking that file and not this one. In any event, debug it as per normal. Press enter to start. Alright, so we're going to use the same number as we did in the last video, 100. So I need to go through and let the computer pick, so it's going to be lower. I'll just go through and do this. So far, the breakpoint hasn't been hit yet, but it'll do that as soon as I enter H now to go higher. If I do that, you can see what's happened there. We stopped on line 8 and low does equal high. We can see both values there in the variables pane at the bottom of the screen for low and for high. So that means the condition will now evaluate to false and the while loop will terminate. If we click step over, let's just check that that does happen. You can see that did happen. Basically, because the while loop terminated normally, we didn't break out of it, execution is continuing in the else block, as you can see sitting on line 30. We switch to the console tab. If I click on resume program now, you see we've got the last two lines of output there. So we should do that again, this time with a number that doesn't cause low and high to become equal. So I'm going to set a breakpoint on the break statement on line 23. Okay, I'm going to start the debugger again. Enter to start. This time my number is going to be 250. So I'm going to press enter, which I've done, and I'm going to enter lower. This time that answer is correct, so I'm going to press C for correct. And we've now hit the breakpoint, as you can see. So the debugger stops on our breakpoint now on line 23. We're about to break out of the loop. So that means that the else block won't be executed. Go back to the console tab. We can see that the computer got it in 2 guesses. So we use step over. That confirms that the else block isn't executed, there's no more code, and the program's terminated, as you can see. Alright, so that's what else does when used with a loop. Because Python reuses the word else for this, it can be confusing. It would have been a lot clearer if Python used something that perhaps made a bit more sense, so something like instead of else, perhaps completed. That would probably have made a lot more sense. Or perhaps no break. But unfortunately that's not the case. It doesn't use either of those, it uses else. So I'll just undo both of those and go back to what we had. But at this point you do now know what else does when used in a for or a while loop. You don't have to use it in your own code, but you may come across it in code that you have to work with, and now hopefully you've got a good understanding of what it does. Alright, so in the next video we're going to see else used in an earlier example from this section. See you in the next video.